I'm back for more pain. The Manus run simply did not scratch my masochistic itch, and so unfortunately, I find myself again in the position of needing a different kind of challenge run. Tedium is not my best friend when it comes to finding ways to hurt myself in these games. As impressive as it is to beat the entire game with only Thorn armor, I just don't have the patience to focus for that long. These games are, effectively, an exercise in problem solving. A crude exercise where the answer is often finding the biggest numbers, but a problem solving exercise nonetheless. I touched on this idea in the intro to my Manus video, where in a nutshell, I explained that I specifically enjoy challenges that require a puzzle to be solved, not a brick wall to be caved in with my forehead. The Manus run did give me that, to an extent, but far too often that run devolved into shooting slowly at the end of a corridor. Simply put, the main challenge was the ungodly patience needed to overcome it, less so incredible skill. Therefore, I decided that partly due to inspiration from Challenger Andy's All Gwyn run, and partly due to the thematic relevance, that it was time to conquer an all Artorias run. But Mr. Mediocre Content Creator, aren't you just rehashing a popular form of content that will undoubtedly gain you clout? No, my child. Allow me to explain. In Andy's run, the Gwyns are not too much bigger than the Chosen Undead, meaning that a large chunk of the game's hallways were free real estate for him to chase down and subsequently rail Andy's character. Artorias is a similar size, moves just as fast, almost every single attack knocks the player down, and his godforsaken somersault actually ignores iframes. On top of that, he cannot be cheesed through parry damage like Gwyn can. There was no way to kill an Artorias by hand except through fighting him. This felt like a challenge worth overcoming. Little did I know, Artorias would end up coming over me. I had some general knowledge of how to beat this run already, mainly just from suffering through the Manus run blind. I knew I needed the composite bow for the high damage at range, I knew I needed miracles for the chip damage I'll be taking in various long boss attempts, and I knew I needed a main weapon that upgraded with Twinkling Titanite. Since Artorias doesn't drop anything, I wouldn't be able to farm for regular chunks. However, all of that was pure wishful thinking, as none of it currently mattered. You know why? Because all of those little goals were after the Asylum. The greatest tarnish my honor has ever received was my inability to beat the All Manus Asylum, and now I was faced with the same issue. Okay, no more yapping, time for the run. I start as Wanderer, mainly because I love the aesthetic, and after being intimidated by a watery Artorias, head up to the first bonfire. Now, this was the moment of truth. If the Asylum Artie fell down normally, by himself, I could just repeat this part of the run over and over until I won. Level 1 with no upgrades Artorias is bitterly awful, but it's at least plausible. However, I am out of luck already. Multiple Arties fall down, and I'm forced to trap myself in the next corridor. Why do I say trapped? Well, there's an Artorias blocking me in, as well as many Artoriases after him that I now have no choice but to try and skirt around. On my next go, I find what will become probably the most useful trick in this run, manipulating Artorias' AI. Artorias has a lot of distance closing moves, but they are all used under separate specific circumstances. This one is only used at extreme distances, if you spam too much healing / projectiles, and almost always at the beginning of combat. Artorias tracks the ground beneath him, and then jumps a long way away, fortunately removing his hitbox and allowing me to run right under. I'll come back to this later. For now, I'm stuck again already. This fog wall has an Artorias right behind it, but I use the invincibility frames to cheese past him. The wall is already broken for some weird reason, and it seems safe inside, but I speak to Oscar on the rightmost side anyway. I get bonked on the way, but successfully make it to the bonfire. Now, here's where the main issues arise. The door to the Asylum Artie is locked, obviously, with a mystery Artorias behind it, who I'm assuming is the demon itself. The only way into the arena is around the top, which is of course filled with a ton of hollow Artoriases in a very narrow hallway. I find that I can actually hit this Artie through the door, which seems to me like the most likely solution, if not the most pleasant. This is excruciatingly slow, as I do insanely low damage and can only attack in specific windows. Namely, I find this thrust move leaves Artorias in a long enough recovery for me to get in a running attack, as well as the large jump move I mentioned from before. It's also worth noting that I of course get atomized if I make a single mistake, as I do here after giving Artorias paper cuts for about 10 minutes. If you're wondering why I didn't attempt the top part more, for the possibility of being able to at least fight Artorias in the demon arena, I already knew it would be impossible to get past from my experience with the Manus run. That meant the only way forward, and the only way to avenge my fallen honor, was to hit Artorias' hands enough that he just gives up. Artorias has a very high resistance to slash, but fairly low strike resistance, and luckily the cleric starts with a mace, as well as extra healing miracles. I make a new character, and at least somewhat happy at the thought of having a decent head start on healing when I escape the asylum, get to work. The running attack of the mace has a high recovery window, but if I attack only when Artorias either jumps or thrusts, this strategy seems actually consistent. He doesn't take a crazy amount of extra damage, but every bit counts, annoyingly. I experiment as much as I can with trying to bait out the lunge attack, and to save me narrating over 45 minutes of footage of me trying different tactics, I find that running in and then out of his range is the most consistent setup. The main concern I have with this dodgy strategy is that Artorias can buff himself, which will make 90% of his attacks instantly kill me, as well as stack his buff, which will kill me if he so much as coughs on me. I'm making this strategy sound really neat and consistent on paper, but holy fuck it was infuriating. Especially when I lose a 50-minute attempt because I accidentally jump while sprinting to the door and get pulverized by Artorias' massive rod. Shitty Dark Souls controls aside, even when I have a decent rhythm going, this takes eons. But after steadily going hollow myself, I finally take down my first Artorias, and luckily enough, it turns out it was the right one. The hollow Artoriases attempt to ambush me, but I escape completely unscathed and can finally, properly begin the run. Starting things off on a positive note, Firelink Shrine is not safe. For whatever reason, Artorias apparently needed pathfinding for small cliffs, despite his little circle of an arena, and can enter the shrine and therefore interrupt me at the bonfire. Fun fact, this interruption will persist throughout the entire run, anytime I want to rest at this bonfire. I try to bait them here using the tree, but it isn't fully perfect. For now, I just very quickly put my vitality up to 49, and after making sure the tree strat definitely doesn't work, head down to the valley. So far it seems safe, other than the Artorias waking up from cryosleep. Small fun fact here, Artorias only has two possible states: T-posing, if an initially passive enemy spawns as him, such as this dragon, or aggressive, which normal enemies, or passive enemies that are headshot, become and stay as until death. More on this later. For now, I try to get this Artorias to fall off, but he gets stuck at the bridge opening, at least until he backflips off. Now the next stretch should be easy, as the Artorias most likely can't run up the tiny valley path. That's just one though, surely it was just bad luck. Okay, so not only is Firelink unsafe, permanently, I also am blocked off from Andre unless I can find a way to clear this dumbass valley. Artorias lives in a flat disc, the exact same as Manus. Why does he need intelligent pathfinding? Manus understood the assignment perfectly and fell off whenever he possibly could. Anyways, this is where I get a really good taste of Artorias' girth sword. The front flip attack, like I mentioned earlier, ignores iframes. So what do you think happens when, say, a second Artorias begins the attack while I'm already flat on the ground? Artorias doesn't have any ranged attacks, but holy fuck, his attacks have range, and he moves fast. I need to either find a way to kill that whole group or somehow outpace them. I take a break from existential dread and buy up some miracles, just for the healing boost for when I do eventually make it past this point. I also experiment a little and find that despite getting fucking dunked on, I can make it past the horde by jumping off this ledge and jumping to the bridge. Artorias tracks the ground below him when he jumps super high, so he can't actually clear small ledges like this, since he apparently has a sensor below him to check for it, probably so he can't accidentally clip into his arena. Anyways, it works to my favour. I still have to do it every single time, but now I have a consistent kill method for Firelink. I farm a lot, and max out my stamina before giving the valley another shot. I make it back to the bridge by the foreskin in my teeth, I think the saying is, and by standing at the right distance, I can bait the ARTORIASes to jump and die. With that, I now have a strat for the valley too. I head up to darkroot, and after being bullied by the Black Knight ARTORIAS for the entire way up, I grab the bow for future use, and he falls off the cliff, unfortunately not giving me the halberd. Well, that's actually really bad. I only have so many chances at getting a decent twinkling weapon for this run, and as I'd need the regular Titanite for my bow, and I didn't want to just reuse the Mega Black Knight sword again. The top is blocked by the plants, but this little cliff is perfect for baiting. Andre, beautiful as ever, greets me over his anvil, and I finally have a perfectly safe and useful bonfire. I upgrade the bow and buy max arrows and take a peek upstairs. While this whole bonfire area is safe, this doorway is a choke point for Artorias instead of the end doorway. It seems like only some Artoriases can fit through apparently. That's fucking foreshadowing, by the way. I currently do 34 damage on a headshot, which means it takes a little over 100 to kill one Artorias. It's not that simple though. Artorias, like I mentioned before, has several reactionary attacks for different player actions. The Mega Jump is triggered at long distances, and this Somersault is triggered at medium range projectiles / healing. The issue here is that Artorias leans to the side as he flips, meaning that despite guaranteeing a headshot when he lands, I miss the first shot every time he decides to flip. This drastically increases the time to kill a single Artorias, which already is at over 100 arrows in perfect circumstances. Also, the 34 damage is actually counter damage and headshot damage. 28 is my usual headshot damage, and 25 is my regular damage. The guaranteed shot I mentioned does make this vaguely consistent though, but I need to be locked on for it to work. Aiming like I am here just does not work from this distance. Also, best to mention while I'm on the topic, the speed of the bow also greatly helps with the consistency of landing lock-on hits. The longbow is much slower than the short bows, therefore extremely terrible at landing consistent hits. I do have a plan for this though. I put a stopper on the hallway activities for now, which I'm already really excited at the thought of continuing, and head into darkroot. There's many items here that are of high interest to me, with a priority being the ninja ring and the black bow. The ninja ring increases the distance you roll, the amount of iframes you get, and reduces time between actions after rolling, meaning I can roll further, better, and much quicker, which I feel would be extremely useful for outrunning Artorias hordes. Also, I wanted to go for more of a nimble sword fighting build over my mega strength tank from the Manish run, just for the sake of variety. However, this is pure wishful thinking because I'm stuck again. Exact same issue as the hallway. The distance is too small between me and the doorway to stop Artorias from spamming somersaults. Backing off doesn't work either, as it just triggers the mega jump, which also can dodge my arrows. Not a big deal though, as Artorias kindly reminds me that this Valorant angle is in fact not fucking safe. This time I tried the forest instead, and managed to get the horde stuck on some of the trees. Most of them anyway. I managed to get some to fall off, but I've still got several on my tail, but I bait them off the terrain on my way back to the hunters. I kick Shiva out of sight, but he sees me smack his guard anyway, and coupling in both my lack of a decent weapon and my enormous skill issue, I survive 80 Artoriases but die to the worst AI on the planet. Also, the ninja falls off, which means there's a high chance the ring despawned as I died. I taunt the Artorias in the church just to feel something again, and head to the forest again to make sure the ring is gone. I try using the bridge down below, which actually seems to work, but I get mobbed on the way back, just within reach of the ring, which, if it hadn't despawned already, definitely had now. Actually, never mind, it's still there. Thank fuck. I keep trying in the forest for the other items I need, and use the ladder as it's more consistent for baiting, but the trees are just choked with Artoriae. I decide to give up on the black bow for now and grab Shiva's armor instead for the slash defense and the fashion. I also quickly head over to grab Havel's ring, which was no trouble. Also, this is what the Taurus demon fight looks like. With that, I have a new goal. I need much higher damage to deal with that hallway without going insane. So back to Firelink it is. I take a quick look at Blighttown before I continue on, and yeah, okay. Back on topic, my goal is the composite bow for the high damage and speed. I farm a measly 3 million souls at Firelink, enough for level 150, and high scaling for when I get the bow. Okay, new Londo time. The first issue is these goobers. They rush me every single time, but get stuck right here, and with a bit of effort I can shoot them if they don't fall off. My damage is much better, but still needs work. Next issue is this little ambush. Despite taking a guided missile to the back of the head, I can outrun them to the same little choke point. On my third try, I instead grabbed the Firekeeper soul first thing, and managed to juke the ambush enough to end up on the bridge. This next part is choked with Artorias, and well. Also, I find out here that if I stand in the sweet spot of his attack range, Artorias won't somersault and will instead continuously stab, which means guaranteed safe shots at extremely close range. His buff is the only thing that can hit me here, but he normally rolls back a few times before he does it. When he doesn't, I can just headshot him, as you'll see later on. Anyways, the path is clear after this point, and after 706 arrows, I grab my beloved. I also unlock the seal while I'm here. After some awkward bonfire resting to reset the arties, I upgrade the composite bow to +5. The damage isn't much higher, but the DPS increase from the longbow is incredible. I also up my endurance to 50 to make the ninja ring work once I change the Havel ring for the favor ring. Before I begin this next part, I want to put it into context. For my editing process, I record in hourly chunks, then both number them and write brief events that happened in that chunk in the name of the file to make it easier to write the script. I'm normally quite extensive in terms of what happens in each hourly chunk, including mentioning parts that would make a good joke or just a part of the footage that I just ran around in, so that I can explain something in my thought process without interrupting something important. This next part is just called fucking hallway, just so you understand how this next part felt without the YouTube filter. Let me explain. The two main goals at this point in the game are ringing both bells. The first bell is on top of the church. I already knew from the Manish run that attempting to enter from the elevator side would get me mobbed instantly, meaning my only option was to slowly brute force through the millions of hollows in the church. The difference between this run and the Manish run is that the Manish run was nothing but pure tediousness. There was still the threat of draining my resources through constant chip damage as I baited each Manus to the hallway, but they couldn't follow me further, and I just had to shoot them, no matter how long it took. Like I mentioned before, the Artorias that made it past the hallway choke point was pure fucking foreshadowing, as without warning, the mega jump can launch them past the doorway and make them land either on top of me, which damages me and instantly forces me to run and heal, or land behind me, instantly ruining the attempt, as I can't get past, and I get whittled down until I die. The worst part of this is that it is completely random when an Artorias will either fly above the doorway or instantaneously pop through because of the massive hitboxes needing to make space. Now you're probably thinking, why don't I just stand far away, out of range of the jump attack, and shoot for however long it takes? Sure, that's a viable idea, but consider the fact that there is probably 40 Artoriases in this church, meaning I would be shooting for 2 hours just to get one attempt at a fight that includes 2 Artoriases at once. I wanted a better solution that wouldn't drive me insane. If it isn't obvious as well, I'm explaining all of this in hindsight, meaning I had to work for this information, and it took a hell of a lot of failed attempts to recognize just how awful and unpredictable this hallway was. Was this the worst, most aggravating part of the run? No. It was fucking close though. For example, here's me losing a really good attempt to an Artorias who just decided to front flip through the opening for actually zero reason. He wasn't pushed through, he just decided to fuck up the 30 minutes I spent getting here. The only thing in my favor throughout this ordeal is that I'm next to Andre, and I can repair my bow and restock my arrows without resetting the enemies, meaning I theoretically could always beat this hallway, provided this shit doesn't happen. Spoiler alert, it kept fucking happening. On my 6th attempt, I think, I made it to the church proper and up the stairs, before realizing that yes, Artorias could follow me in the corridors, meaning I'd have to wipe out the whole fucking church for one gargoyles attempt. I got the Firelink shortcut barely, but it didn't give me much hope. Also, here's how it looks attempting to go up the shortcut. I decided to put it off and head to the asylum, as I still needed a legitimate weapon to beat the gargoyles with. The bow was not going to cut it. The hitboxes of this area's terrain are pretty dodgy, but after some messy baiting, I either shot, made them fall off, or got the Artorias stuck. The asylum was fairly easy, and with a bit of effort, I managed to get the Black Knight sword from the second night. Thank God. I now had a viable, easy to upgrade option for the run. I also got the doll and beat the stray demon before I left, just for the boss checklist. Back at Firelink, I level a little more, and up the Black Knight sword to +2, even though I'm not fully sold on using it just yet. I also decided to give Blighttown a go, considering I have much better movement now with the ninja ring. I try to use the elevator to remove the fall stun, but it happens anyway, and that split second is all the horde needed. I also lose 2 million souls doing this, which I didn't realize till I died, and then lose them permanently thanks to ARTORIAS and his girthy dripping greatsword. Holy fuck, I'm already so sick of this. I change tactic and make the single best decision in this entire run, and one that prevented this video from being 3 hours long. I grab the red tearstone ring. This ring boosts all damage by 50% when under 20% health, except it stacks multiplicatively. This means that it stacks with the headshot multiplier and the counter damage multiplier, and it is extremely easy to maintain, provided I'm in a safe position to shoot. I set it up fairly easily by taking damage until I'm lowish, then blocking damage with a 90% resist shield to get myself in range. With just one ring, my damage goes from a max of 71 to 83 to 249. Just one ring. This is with a +5 bow, by the way. Now, this is all well and good, but this hallway is still monumentally fucked. Like I mentioned before, Artorias landing behind me is a guaranteed death sentence, but now if he lands on me, it's also an instant death. While gaining my health back wasn't an issue, due to my miracle stock, the red tearstone ring put me in the aggravating position of speeding up my attempts enormously, but also scaling up the risk of losing the attempt alongside. Despite that lovely threat, I had started to find a strategy. Standing at a specific range would force Artorias to run continuously without reacting, which I already knew. But couple this with the higher range longbow and my damage strat, I could reliably do over 100 damage per shot. I also find a much more consistent method for luring Artorias to the better choke point. By standing at around this area, I could bait the mega jump, but be out of range and have enough time to run to the doorway and avoid his follow-up attacks. This position also allowed me to properly watch him while he jumped, and much more safely and quickly whittle down the hallway. With these new techniques, forged out of a blade of pure rage, with a hilt of mild attraction towards Artorias, I was able to extremely slowly clear out the church. I got the favor ring, and after a solid 40 minutes, with my much higher damage and safer strategies, I made it to the gargoyles for the first time. Right, I knew this would be awful, mainly because the second Artorias would spawn at full health. So I had several ideas of how to cheese at least one Artorias, and I intended to, at the very least, use this attempt for research. 40 minutes in the making, I went inside. For the first test, I tried to shoot the second Artorias gargoyle, since every other idle animation Artie can be killed, but no luck. He can't be activated until the fight starts. I then try my strategy from the Manish run, this little offshoot, but holy fuck, he can follow me. Luckily he backflips out, but that's another option down. Only one other left. I try to bait him off the ledge, but he not only pathfinds around it, he also can't fall off. Fuck. I actually just had to beat 2 Artoriases in an arena that I can extremely easily be knocked out of, thereby losing 40 minutes of progress to get there. I don't even get one down before I die. Right, I'm putting this off for a bit. There's still some aspects of my character available to improve, aside from weapon upgrades, and I'm going to need as much as I can get. I tackle the hallway again and grab the lower Burg key, and then head back to Firelink for my next side quest, the Catacombs. This cramped, overstuffed, absurdly complicated to consistently beat area contains the Rite of Kindling, which would let me have 20 Estus for the gargoyles. Small side note, it also contains the Crescent Moon Axe, another Twinkling Titanite weapon. But not only does it have split damage, so basically terrible damage, it also requires killing patches early, which locks me out of extra miracles after Nito. Just a small footnote in the main quest I obviously end up giving up on. Also, this area is extremely nuanced, as in literally every enemy and every part requires a different, overly specific strategy. And so to not waste my viewers' time, I'm going to try and gloss over all of my ridiculous workshopping, and instead briefly explain the thought process and winning strategy for each chunk. To start with, I can't run through the graveyard, and instead workshop a dodgy strategy for getting the Artorias to die. I never actually found a consistent method for getting past the graveyard, as Artie's pathfinding is too good to just run off the cliff. Sometimes he jumps off this ledge, other times I get mobbed. With my health bar, I can fairly easily muscle through 2 Artorias, but it isn't ideal as I still have a whole area to get through. One Artorias always gets stuck here, which is extremely irritating as every single time I want to go here, I have to kill him. The tier stone strat technically only costs 1 great heal exert, but it's still annoying. This Artorias here has a very high chance of backflipping off the ledge to buff himself, which makes him impossible to shoot and therefore impossible to safely kill. This can be worked around by either headshotting him constantly or firing at a specifically close or long range, like I mentioned in the hallway. This part is fucked though, oh my god. First of all, these Artoriases are landmines and immediately activate if I stand near them. That's not too bad, until you couple that with the fact the next room has 5 Artoriases in it, 1 blocking the mandatory lever room, and this dumbass doorway doesn't properly work. After a lot of pain, I find that this specific angle stops the Artoriases from escaping, and eventually manage to get the lever, and fight my way into the Catacombs proper. Side note, just watch my soul count as I go through each attempt, in case you wonder what happens to the masses of Artoriases. Like I mentioned before, I was originally also after the Crescent Moon Axe, which is why I didn't skip the area by jumping down, and instead threw this attempt into Blighttown by going inside the tunnels. Next time I actually make it through, but of course don't kill Patches and instead attempt a different weapon, the Black Knight Great Axe. Absurdly powerful and also extremely quick, it is quite literally the best weapon I could possibly have in this run, with the upgrade limitations, and it's right at the bottom of this area. I do my best, spending way too much time trying to even make it to the knight, but eventually make it to his little spot, and he's fucking gone, lost in the Artorias source. I jump down and try to make my way back up to find a decent sniping spot, but naturally get spit roasted by an Artorias either side. Oh well, it's not like I needed a win or anything to make up for my declining mental state. I go back one more time and just book it to Pinwheel. Also for some reason, the Bone Wheel Artoriases are just gone. The T-poses are from Arties that die from fall damage, so I guess somehow every single Bone Wheel fell out of the map. I'll take it, I guess. Pinwheel isn't hard, and I get the right. I also try to make some early progress in the tomb, but you know, what did you expect? So, to take stock of what I currently had on hand to face the gargoyles, decent-ish unupgraded armor, a +2 small range slow greatsword, and a bow that isn't good without low HP. Oh, and a lot of healing, which I would absolutely chew through considering how slow fighting 2 Artoriases currently is, to say nothing of how dangerous the arena itself is. Right, new plan. New fucking horrific plan. It was time to suck it up and deal with Blighttown. As some lovely YouTube comments pointed out, the enemies don't respawn infinitely, contrary to what I thought before. Therefore, I can't just quit out spam to cheese the area. And annoyingly, in the name of my honor as a mediocre content creator, I instead sit here firing arrow after arrow until both my bows break until the very last Artorias is killed. I'm not joking. I actively shot arrows for an hour and 15 minutes. I had to constantly re-aim the bow as well, meaning I couldn't just zone out as I'd end up wasting tons of arrows, which I already did considering how much they jumped around. Overall, it took an hour and 15 minutes and 2,000 fucking arrows to make the swamp safe, and even then there were still Artoriases near the Great Hollow. If I didn't have the red tier stone ring literally tripling my damage, I would have been here for over 4 fucking hours. And would have been forced to backtrack to Andre to restock and repair without dying and make it all the way back, most likely 3 or 4 times. There are some items in Blighttown I want, but I am not pushing my fucking luck. I head straight to Quelaag, and with not much effort ring my first spell. I then head into the Hollow for extra Twinkling Titanite, even though for some reason the lizards aren't Artoriases. I also run around Blighttown collecting for a bit, and unfortunately find out that I can't access the depths from this side, meaning no power within until after Capra Demon. Oh well. 1 bell done, 1 to go. I upgrade my flask, kindle Firelink, and decide to just commit to the Black Knight sword. I had no better options, and it was still a fantastic, if slow, weapon. Time to face the gargoyles. I had my consistent hallway strat, a +4 high damage weapon, tons of healing, and most importantly, had recently made progress, and that made me confident. I struggled through the church, and got to the gargoyles after a riveting 45 minutes. I headed inside, and you know what? It was fucking easy. My damage was high, my speed and defense were excellent, and best of all, I had finally gotten good. I had spent hours dodging Artorias at this point, and despite the Black Knight sword being on the slower side, my character was so strong that I could easily muscle through the fight. In only 4 Estus, not even close to needing the extra uses, the gargoyles go down, the bell is rung, and I can finally move on. Okay, break over. Time to continue on. I had a lot more to cover in this run. Sens being unlocked made this bonfire way scarier, but still perfectly safe. Sens itself was actually quite easy, if slow. The abundance of small ceilings and doorways meant I could always shoot through the crowds. The Iron Golem was also naturally easy. I forgot to mention before, but taking consecutive hits from the Black Knight Sword briefly stuns Artorias, basically turning every single one-on-one fight completely trivial. Sens was done. But oh, Anor Londo. This is the crucible in which the true submissive and breedable undead are forged, and by Lord Gwyn was I fucking forged. To start with, I bait out a single Artorias up to the top of the stairs, just to thin out the crowd waiting for me. I can fairly easily just sprint through the others and decide to not grab the bonfire just yet. The elevator is perfectly timed to let me escape, and I make it down. Fun fact, this is the only time this part is that easy. Also, I get some visitors. I grab the Demon Titanite while it's quiet and grab the bonfire and attempt to make it back to the elevator. I mean, technically I did. So this is the first shitty part of Anor Londo. The elevator is literally never at the top by the time I sprint there. And considering the Artorias on both sides of the big balcony, I have to absolutely book it to the elevator shaft, survive until the elevator returns, and make it down while praying the Artorias fall off. Of course, this is ridiculously easier said than done. On my second try, I do manage to bait them, but of course I wouldn't be complaining if this was the only time I had to deal with it. The painting room is easy, naturally, but the issues start when I raise the bridge. You see, there's a lot of enemies in Anor Londo. Artorias has a massive aggro range and has excellent pathfinding, and by opening up the bridge, it gives a perfect non-consensual path straight towards my waiting cheeks. Also, really cool feature, this bridge has invisible walls, so no cheese for me. I make it all the way to the small bridge, but to my fucking horror, Artorias can fit here too. To recap, I need to dodge the elevator tower, and if I somehow manage to do that, I need to also bait like 8 Artorias to either die or slow down enough to let me make it all the way up to the arches. Next go, I try to bait the Artorias to fall down the shaft, but the elevator is not only timed perfectly for me to miss it, it's also timed perfectly to catch every Artorias that falls down. I get lucky this attempt and they all jump in, which gives me a chance to workshop a strategy for the next part. I try to use the stairs to make some distance, but Artorias' front flip now has an equally lethal alternative to damage. I have such high health by now that it won't kill me, but it massively delays me if he does a triple, literally locking me in place until he's finished. The elevation of the stairs means it's not a huge issue specifically here, but it happens again right at the bridge mouth, letting every single Artorias catch up. I make it halfway up, but of fucking course they can follow me here too. Again, why does Artorias need good pathfinding? After a nice outside view of the elevator tower, I tried delaying my elevator dash a little to hopefully get some better timing, but all it accomplishes is the elevator doing the exact same thing. I do somehow get a few Artorias plugged in the doorway though, no idea how. This time I kill the gargoyle, just to lessen the horde for the future, and instead use the wheel platform to bait the Artorias to fall, grouping them up, and then use the stairs to delay them again. They catch up to me again anyway, and I get delayed by a somersault perfectly enough to get me launched off the edge. Don't worry, I also have the elevator to look forward to every time I fucking die. I can't even blame this one on Artorias. My favourite part is that there isn't even a consistent strategy for surviving the elevator wait. I actually just have to get lucky, and my fucking god do I get lucky with every single Artorias here, at least from their perspective. Like 8 attempts later, I finally make it to the bottom, and instead try to use the outside of the tower to bait them off. Naturally, there's invisible walls here too. I get ready to cope with using my bow again, but Artorias thankfully saves me from the opportunity. 8 years later, I finally get lucky. Not a single Artorias uses the somersault, and finally I'm free. Never again will I have to deal with that mess. I never got the chance to talk to Celeste, so the bonfire is lonely, but I kindle it in his name. The inside of the capital is less annoying, but a volcano is colder than hell. I need to move out of this room quick, or I end up getting blocked in. To make the stairs shortcut, I have to bait all of the Silver Knights correctly, including the one at the top of the stairs that blocks me if I rush it. This part is more resource heavy than actually dangerous, but it's still annoying to lose some miracles. I head down to the giant blacksmith, but he's being bullied by the Abyss squad, so I leave him for now, under threat of losing my twinkling Titanites. Looks like I'll need to beat ONS with what I have, which, to be fair, could be much worse. Smorius absolutely poses on me, and Ornorius actually looks kind of normal. This fight was all that stood between me and bonfire warping, and a safe Anor Londo, and I was not giving up without being pounded roughly by 2 Artoriases. You might think that this fight would play out similar to the gargoyles, and you'd be half correct, except for the fact that I need to deal with both for the entire fight, including the one in phase 2, and I don't get a half health head start on one. The pillars are extremely useful for helping me dodge attacks without using stamina, which I'll need to attack in every opportunity I get. The biggest issue in this fight is that once Artorias loses some health, he retreats and buffs himself. This isn't difficult as long as I'm lucky enough to interrupt him, but naturally there's another goober in this fight as well. The pillars also work against me if I'm not careful. I survive, but of course, the Artorias I'm focusing starts to buff while I'm dodging the other, and I don't have enough time to hit him 3 times to knock him out of it. I do actually really well for my first attempt. The ninja ring iframe's absolutely carrying me, but of course the fucker double buffs himself, knocking me back, and I get atomized by his brother. Oh well, just have to easily make it back for another try. I also find out that making it easily on my first attempt was a fluke, as Artorias can actually climb the stairs and follow me, because I can't simply just have an extremely difficult boss fight to beat. I do at least have a vague strategy. Basically, never lose lock-on, as it helps me keep track of the damaged one and take advantage every single time the other Artorias does a move with a high recovery. It's still largely reliant on RNG, like here, where of all fucking moves, I get triple somersaulted while the other one buffs. This game is sentient. I just keep getting stomped. It is so easy for each Artorias to accidentally complement the other, and each hit I land is purely up to chance. I am literally 1 hit away from winning, and then get my Catacombs filled to bursting with both of their abyssal greatswords. Then something weird happens. It's like the constant severe concussions against the Anor Londo tiles actually activated my brain, and on the next attempt I absolutely demolish them. I make it to phase 2 with 14 Estus, and the rest is beautiful, beautiful history. Guinevere patronizes me, and I respond in kind, finally making Anor Londo safe. I place the Lord Vessel and head back to the city for some juicy upgrades. I take out one Dark Sun Goober and have an incredible sword fight with the other. I grab the Estus upgrade and head over to my beloved, where I immediately restock and buy my fill of Twinkling Titanite. I also grab the Giant's Halberd, the full Giant set, as well as some Mega Arrows for a secret source I wanted to test out. The Giant set is golden heavy armor, and at this point in the run, I wanted to make an ultra tanky paladin, as I felt it was kinda appropriate considering Artorias is corrupted and all. The Giant's Halberd is extra special though. It has much higher range than the Black Knight sword, slightly less damage, but much more consistent. It also looks cool as hell. It's too heavy to wear with anything but lame fashion souls though, so I decided to try it out alongside my weird mix of paladin / cleric armor. Now, I'd obviously hit a bit of a crossroads. I had all 4 lords, as well as the DLC to beat before the run was done. Nito and Seath were currently off the table, especially Seath, as the areas were absolute nightmares to tackle, and I didn't really want to deal with the other 2 either. I instead decided to do some cleanup. I go after Gwendolyn first to test out my new setup. The Halberd is much more practical in terms of one-on-one fighting, as it is just so much more consistent. The damage difference doesn't matter if I end up hitting the Artorias twice as much. Also, it's golden and does lightning damage, so I thought it was cool. I then grab the Dragon Slayer bow, which at first might seem counterintuitive. The composite bow is obviously much faster, but I have a secret trick up my sleeve. With boss cleanup in mind, I head to the Burg for the Taurus Demon. On a headshot, with the stupid red Tearstone multiplier, I do nearly 500 damage. The slowness of the shots doesn't even matter. Artorias gets absolutely crushed. The only annoying thing is that I currently can't carry both my halberd and bow at the same time, but I still fall in love. Oh well, I eventually do. I don't actually realize how good this is for a little bit. Also, this area sucks. Like, really bad. I keep accidentally dying to random swords, and eventually learn to heal up before I change shooting spots. The Burg is very cramped, which makes it not particularly difficult, just tedious. I managed to make it to the merchant and buy a full stack of repair powder for the horrors to come, as well as some firebombs. These are for something truly horrific, and while I'd rather not resort to it, it's best to have it on hand. I'll explain when I get to it. I also try to say bye to the merchant, but accidentally shoot him. As an apology, I let him tickle me for a bit, but eventually decide to... No comment. Instead of heading back into the Burg, I decide to clear out darkroot. I start baiting the Artorias off the cliff before I realize I literally can just warp now. And after a quick restock and upgrade, head over to Sif, who isn't hard. The butterfly is a bit goofy on the bridge, but just as easy. Now, I didn't really have many bosses to clean up, that were possible at least. The idea of Capra was terrible, Taurus similarly seemed painful with the archers on the tower, and the Gaping Dragon was locked after Capra. The four lords needed a reality check, and I decided that Nito was first on the list. The four kings fight in area would be painful. The archives were guaranteed to be stupidly hard, and Izalith was easy enough that I could pretty much do it whenever I wanted. It was time to make the fun trip back to the Catacombs, which, naturally, entails all of the mind-numbing strategy I discussed before. The one positive is that the Dragon Slayer bow does a fuck ton of damage, speeding it up a ton. The first bonfire is easy to get to, but oh my god, it is a rocky road from here. I have to move quick when I rest here, as an Artorias immediately locks onto the bonfire. I grab some humanities from patches as well as the skull lantern and mentally lube myself up. The issues in this area come from Artorias having weirdly good pathfinding. My general goal is to get them fall off the edge and into the lantern pit, but it's weirdly inconsistent and naturally never safe. The bonfire ladder is also a decent spot, basically anywhere that they can't follow me back up from. I waste the first attempt on getting the silver ring and almost get mobbed on the second go, but find out that Patch's spot is a decent backup fall point. I almost start to relax before I get jump scared again, and after being delayed by my favourite attack, end up being squished. It's difficult to show a sense of scale with how dark the tomb is, but there are a lot of Artorias in this one chunk, and very, very little room. I managed to dodge the first Artorias wave and then get jump scared in the exact same way, and after not panicking at all, fall back to each of my fall points until I managed to lose them. Against probably my best interests, I do light the second bonfire, and the local arties join together to peacefully agree with me. I do start to get the hang of the falling back strategy, but the second dark part is basically just a messy rush through that is of course filled to the brim with Artorias. I eventually make it to the ladder, and the crystal lizard decides to wait till I'm in my menu before saying hi. He respectfully gives me some space, and after making sure the rest of the tunnel is safe, I politely obtain Grant from Leroy. Grant has the absolute highest damage total in the game, split between physical and magical damage unfortunately, but I still had high hopes for it, especially since it fit my paladin look I was going for. I show this Artorias how slippery the cliff is, but make it back next time without issue. This area is extremely slippery as I showcased, but also filled with Artorias landmines that naturally don't fall off very easily. I basically just slowly bait them all off, using attacks like the Mega Jump, the Wide Swing, and the Somersault to force them to slip. It is really satisfying though. The real issue is this part. The Artorias here infinitely respawn, due to From Software's eternal wisdom. My only real option is to try to clear the hallway enough for an opening, heal up, and try to make it through before it gets clogged again. The terrain of their cave is pretty dodgy for Artorias to find their way around, and I basically just have to hope they get stuck for long enough when they respawn. After about 15 minutes, I clear the way enough for an attempt, but an Artorias cuts me off, and I jump instead of roll. I fucking love 2011 controls. A small eternity later, and I'm back at the entrance, and after shooting for a few years, decide to just say fuck it and muscle my way through. I pop onto the other side, and this time actually roll like I wanted to, and with that, I make it to Nito. I have plenty of heals to spare, and from experience, I knew that for whatever reason, the randomizer I'm using doesn't actually affect Nito's 4 little buddies. Funnily enough, the fight is actually kinda challenging, as while I insta-kill the skeletons, they poise break me fairly often, and actually provide pretty good support pressure for Gravelord Artorias. I get it on the first try, but it was actually a pretty fun fight. First Lord down. Before I continue, I decide to take a quick blacksmith break, upgrading Grant and thinking of what weapon I want to aim for being the theme of the run. For Manus, that was obviously the Black Knight Greatsword in all of its glory, but I wanted to go for a quick, fast rolling knight over the heavy bruiser I was in the Manus run. Grant seemed pretty decent though, despite the split damage, so I wanted to test that out before I planned for anything else. The next on my list was the Kings. Like I mentioned, I knew Izalith wouldn't be difficult, and Seath would be fucking awful. And so I wanted to check off the exact middle of those two lords in terms of difficulty. Small issue though, the area. The ruins are coated in a thick layer of Artorias paint, and unfortunately I needed to deal with them. I get myself in tier stone range, but this Artorias convinces me to show you what happens if I just try to run past them instead. Naturally, I need to double check, just to make sure I have to shoot arrows for half my lifespan. I also decide to test out Grant, and holy fuck it sucks. The damage might seem high, but it's ridiculously slow, and so small it may as well be a life-size model of my. The Artorias for some reason love grouping around this pillar, so I have an incredible idea. Instead of shooting for 30 minutes, what if I just... I am not looking forward to the kings, as while I'm fairly tanky, my weaponry could definitely use some changes, but I give it a try with the halberd anyway. The first king spawns invisible, which isn't a huge issue as the halberd has massive range, but it does make bursting him down very difficult, as I really need to dodge his knockdown attacks or it'll stall me long enough for the second Artorias to spawn, and then the fight will just snowball. I love this halberd, I really do, but the damage is just not doing it for this fight. Time for some changes. I head back to Anor Londo to grab Havel's set, just as a side quest for when I actually need it, and decide to whip out Old Faithful. The Black Knight's sword is a lot shorter than the halberd, but it staggers Artorias easier, weighs way less, actually letting me use regular armor, and does much more damage. Though it's difficult to predict exactly what attack he's using, the Black Knight's sword does close to 400 damage on a counter hit, and the main king's health bar is what matters in this fight, not each individual Artorias. The second Artorias does join in, and I get bullied by front flips at horribly low health. But with a bit of luck, I wriggle out, and Artorias gives me one last T-pose before I take down my second lord. Okay, time to take stock of what I have and what I've got left. There are 2 lords left to go, the DLC as well as the painting. I'm actually pretty happy with the Black Knight sword and the general build I've got going, but I really wanted to have a more unique build than just a knight using a slightly smaller sword than before. The most obvious way to do that is to invest in dexterity instead of strength, and it just so happens that an extremely powerful dexterity weapon is, hopefully, within reach. It's painting time. Before I make the commitment, as I'd obviously be stuck inside until I beat Priscilla, I grab extra heals from patches and fully repair and stock up on everything I have. It's worth noting that I don't know if this is a mistake. Artorias has shown how good his pathfinding is throughout the course of this run, and there is a very real possibility that I will get soft locked at the bridge, thus ruining this run completely. That's how badly I wanted this dumbass weapon. With preparation done, I'm more or less ready, and after a thrilling 20 minutes of Dark Souls 3 PvP, I enter into what could very likely be the end of Night Manus. I load in at the bridge, and luckily I'm out of aggro range, at least at first. I don't actually aggro the horde till I get to the top of the path, and I quickly run back to see just how far they can actually pathfind. This is where it gets weird. There are multiple Artorias piling on top of each other, and since this is a sloping pathway, they actually end up climbing over each other and can get around the small choke point in the path. Luckily though, they can't follow me onto the bridge, which makes an easy shooting spot, but there is a lot of Artorias in this first section of the painting to clear out. I find that not all of the trees have hitboxes, and I can actually shoot the Artorias with a side hobby of rock climbing. This makes 2 fail-safes for shooting, one at the bridge if they manage to follow me, and one on the hillside. I also find that this spot here actually acts as a choke point too, somehow. The path is slightly too small for Artorias' massive cheeks to squeeze through, provided I'm close enough he doesn't use the big jump. I save the bonfire for later and aggro as many arties as I can. They pile onto the path, and this guy convinces me to fall back a little. I use the same strategy and also make sure to bait out the jump of the last guy before I get close, so he doesn't surprise attack me while I shoot him. It's worth noting that I'm condensing this section quite a lot. Like with the other overly specific scenarios in this run that requires some weird trial and error, if I explained every detail as I discovered it, this video would be 8 years long. So this strategy is just the one that I eventually found to work. A lot of shooting later, I make my way back up to the fort and... You'd think after a certain point I'd become desensitized to the cycle of wasting hours firing arrow after arrow at front flipping morons and then immediately losing that progress because one just decided to not pathfind with the group and ambush me instead. But no, I really haven't. It's just turned from a choice swear word to a single tear rolling down my cheek. On my next go, I aggro as many as I can and book it back to the bridge to hopefully get enough to climb over each other that they fall off and make the process faster. I very nearly get spit roasted, but the Artorias behind me loses his nerve and instead shows me that the spot next to the bridge is actually wide enough for them to fall off. I use this and the other strategies I mentioned before to slowly, safely make my way up inside the tower, 11 Artorias lighter. I make my way up to the bridge and bust out the composite bow to whittle down the few stuck in the doorway. I can't remember if I already said this, but the mega bow knocked me back slightly with every shot, and with an Artorias on either side, I didn't want to risk my progress over greater shooting efficiency. The entrance to the painting was really the only difficult part. I have a very one-sided sword fight with this Artorias, the dragon concedes defeat via gravity, and because I'm not an omega moron, I don't go into the sewer after clearing the bridge top and actually use the shortcut. If you're wondering why I didn't do this in the Manus run, ask me no questions and I will give you no confusing and moronic answers. I grab my prize and very happily check another boss off my to-do list. Now, some quick context. To make boss weapons in Dark Souls 1, you need a +10 weapon, the same type as the one you're making usually, and the boss soul itself. I wanted to make Priscilla's Scythe, an extremely cool and powerful dex weapon, which, as a halberd, required a leveled up halberd. Getting a +10 weapon requires beating Capra, which I obviously hadn't. And as a result, my only halberd was the Giant's Halberd, which is a twinkling Titanite weapon. I was hoping that, despite logic against it, I would be able to use the Giant's Halberd to make Priscilla's Scythe, even though I was fairly sure you couldn't. That was why I risked the painting so early, because I really wanted a cool dex weapon. Keeping to the general theme of this run, of fucking course it doesn't work, and I leave the painting with nothing but a checkmark for a boss and sad disappointment. I would have had to go to the painting anyway, but I really just wanted a dex weapon to be the theme of this build, just for some variety. Despite that, the Eastern armor with the Elite Knight set, alongside the Grass Crest and Black Knight sword, honestly were growing on me. Off the heels of deep, crushing sadness, what better way to fix it than mental hardship? It was time for the archives. I wanted it done and gone, and I was not looking forward to it. I shoot the pigs, grab the bonfire, and gear up for the Elevator of Despair. My strategy is to use Havel's shield to block as much as I can, use the invincibility frames to grab the lever, and then survive the ride down, before running to this invisible wall to shoot the knights that follow me down. This is easier said than done. Despite my massive stamina bar and Havel's shield having huge stability, my stamina disappears against the horde, and since every attack stuns me somewhat, I get stun locked before I grab the lever. Even when I do grab it, I get obliterated on the ride down, even with the weird stone skin buff. To make matters worse, even when I block attacks, I get shoved back a bit. Since Artorias moves so quick, they all shove me away from the lever and move in front of it, making it impossible to actually grab. The absolute worst part of this is that I make it to the lever sometimes. Why is that the worst part? It's because it means it's up to luck whether I get off the lever or not. And as a whole, up to nothing but dumb luck if I'm able to even clear out this elevator. No consistent strategy, just nothing but head bashing against an Artorias shaped brick wall. Also, don't worry, this area gets worse. I find a bit of success using full Havel armor for the defense and poise, and swapping to fast roll armor if I'm able to escape the elevator, so I can actually outrun the Artorias to the outside. Eventually, I'm able to clear enough out I can actually step off the elevator, but I get rushed pretty quickly, and I'm forced to sprint into the main room, which to my horror is filled with so many Artoriases. I get cornered, naturally, but I also realize I forgot to set up the DLC, which thank fuck I didn't make it past on this go, because I'd be stuck in the archives till I beat it. I head back to darkroot and slowly start clearing out the golems, which is made much harder by Artorias actually having a brain and not falling off. I wish I could say the same. This takes a long time, and basically amounts to me farting around on the cliffs, hoping they either die from fall damage and T-pose, or I get lucky with their AI, and they attack themselves off the cliff. I Lion King the final Artorias, which turns out to be the Hydra, and rescue Dusk. DLC prep done, now it's time to commit. I again return to the grindstone, honing my incredible ability to magnetize Artorias greatswords to my cranium, and eventually manage to get the pendant. Now, I know I literally just said it's time to commit, and just before I said I wanted the archives done, but that image of all the Artoriases crowding the staircase terrifies me, because it proves that they can pathfind around the archives, meaning the next section, I'm assuming, will be absolutely hell. I would like to procrastinate, and I need to do the DLC at some point. Anyways, welcome to the Royal Wood. There is an enormous amount of Artoriases in this forest. I say that like that hasn't been the case for literally most of the areas so far, but seriously there are a lot. This bridge is a decently effective choke point. One Artorias gets stuck while the rest run off the cliff, but as you can see, it's a little weird. I ego challenge this Artorias and make a break for the bridge while knights flip between the trees. I make it with health to spare, but the other side is blocked off, and apparently this bridge is too wide to be safe. I bait the one that managed to cross off the cliff with some good timing, and gear up to start shooting my way through, but some random goober plunge attacks me from the skybox. I try to run, but another Artorias decides to drop in, and, well. That clip kinda sums up this run, a mixture of skill, dumb luck, and the purest essence of Miyazaki flavored bullshit. This Artorias hits a sick rail grind, while his body power poses on me. I leave him chilling there just out of respect. But in the 20 seconds it takes for me to run back to the bridge with a horde following me, he apparently couldn't take the burden of his own skill. fame ruins you. Anyways, I mostly clear the first half of the forest this way, to avoid being trapped at the bridge again. The second half wasn't too bad, except for this bug abuser that uses the ledge to cancel his lunge into an overhead. I wish they'd fix the animation cancel bug. It's making ranked Artorias just really fucking awful to try and climb. I throw the cliff edges between me and the horde, and I make it down to the plateau with healing and health to spare. I'm still deciding whether I want Chester's outfit when the dog Artorias let me know they actually can follow me up here. But don't worry, this isn't foreshadowing at all. The elevator shaft helps me deal with them, and then it's time for Big Slime himself. The only normal cutscene in the run, and it's beautiful. I deflect his sword with my eyeballs and take him down easily, before immediately having a round 2. Immediately after leaving the arena, the township knights activate like sleeper agents, and after grabbing the bonfire, I engage in minor tomfoolery involving the elevator, and after resting, give running straight through a try. I try again, mission impossibling my way through the welcome committee, just like Resident Evil 4, and also like Resident Evil 4, eventually get cornered and have several seeds pumped inside me. This section is hard. Every time I respawn, I need to absolutely sprint to the elevator, as if I'm not quick enough, the dogs I mentioned before will corner me. I then ideally need to bait every single Artorias in the top half of the township down this elevator shaft. It's difficult to time correctly, but with how good my healing is now, the only thing that can really stop me is being cornered or falling off. I eventually get the chance to pay my respects, and holy fuck it was hard to do, but I really feel like I needed the good karma for the next part. The top half, while difficult, was at least quick and mildly consistent. The next half of the township was absolutely mind-numbing. There are so many enemies here. This house is a functional choke point, but it is so incredibly painful trying to find a consistent angle to shoot from, as the Artorias move constantly and can very easily get stuck behind a wall where I can't see. I find some decent consistency shooting from the stairs at a specific angle, but the dragon bow knocks me back over time, so I need to constantly fix my overly specific positioning. I also try to use green blossoms to speed up my shooting, as I'm using a massive amount of arrows and my stamina can't keep up normally. I take out every Artorias I can, and finish the last ones with the sword. There's still a ton more left though, and I bait them back upstairs, and attempt to use them for a tear stone activation. I get the effect, but they sink their greatsword claws in deep, and right as I roll away, one fucking Artorias decides to ignore the door and squash me. See, that's what I love about this run. Unlike the Manus run, where everything was messy, but consistent, here, Artorias will just bend the game itself to his own shitty AI. I used 218 Dragon Slayer arrows in that attempt. Dragon Slayer arrows that take an eternity to fire, and I used 218 of them just for Artorias to randomly clip through the door hitbox. I wish I just played FIFA in my impressionable years instead of Dark Souls 2. Anyways, several years of pre-established strategy later, I eventually make it down to the elevator, but surprise, more issues here. The chasm also has a ton of enemies, and the bonfire is not safe. You'd think I could just use this doorway as a choke point, and yeah, I thought that too. I end up using the second doorway, which is just far enough it doesn't trigger any jump attacks. I reuse this strategy over the next 20 minutes or so. Only a few Artorias aggro at a time, so I bait them up, use the elevator as escape if needed, and use both the bow to whittle them down, and the sword if I get bored of shooting. It's not too bad, just really, really slow, but I eventually can explore the abyss a little, and after being convinced not to rescue Sif, I head into Manus the abysswalker, and naturally squish him. 10 humanity in my pocket, and the DLC is checked off. If you're not aware, I can't fight Calamite in these types of runs, as the mimic won't drop the key, and therefore Goff can't shoot him down and start the fight. Time to deal with what's left. I decide at this point I've put it off long enough. I need to deal with the lower Burg at some point, and I may as well put off the archives a bit more. Taurus is nowhere near as bad as I thought. One archer jumps off, and I just fight the other one and then the demon. I also grab the chunks from the lizard. Now, the lower part is a lot more interesting. I slow roast around 10 Artorias for 30 minutes, and try to pick off the rest with my bow. But this little stairway makes it difficult to get consistent hits. It isn't too hard to clear out this part, but my god, it takes a long time. The next area is tricky though, as the Artorias spawn inside the rooms, and I can't just run past as I'm going to need this little stretch clear for later on. I try to clear out the opposite room to make a shooting spot, but I'm too close and he just dodges constantly. I try to run past, but naturally a few more aggro and I'm forced to waste more healing dueling them. It gives me an idea though, I might just be able to tank through with my sword and then shoot from the empty room. I give it a try, failing to realize that Artorias triple buffed himself and I literally get 2 shot. It's cool, I can just wait for another 30 minutes to get another shot. It was actually 45 minutes this time, as for some reason they weren't too happy about being slow cooked via lower Burg crockpot. I just suck it up and decide to slowly shoot the left Artorias, which is made much more annoying on account of the weird door hitboxes. The other two being able to hit me if I'm too close, and him being able to dodge if I'm too far. It's really fun. Eventually I get him and clear out the other one as well. Now, the reason I was so worried about Capra and why I wanted this whole clear was because of the dogs. I assumed Artorias would be able to climb the stairs in the boss arena, and considering there would be 3 Artorias total, I had to think of another alternative to deal with it. The solution I came up with was miserable, and is why I bought the firebombs earlier in the run. If you angle them correctly, you can take out the dogs in a normal run fairly easily, and I assumed I'd have to extremely slowly use the same technique here. Luckily, the dogs actually aggroed before I even entered the fog. I killed one and tried to find the other with firebombs, but no luck. I just had to risk it, unfortunately. I entered, and somehow, some way, the second dog had clipped out of the map. Thank fuck. One less miserable experience leading up to the archives was an absolute treat. The depth, similarly, wasn't too difficult. I had a small shooting gallery at the start, but with a bit of platforming and luck, I grabbed the Ember, barely made it to the shortcut, killed the Mega Rat in case I needed to come back, squeezed through again to the antechamber, and showed Artorias how to properly gape on a dragon. 2 more bosses checked off, and the large Ember to boot. I obviously primarily used the Dragon Slayer bow, but having the composite bow as a substitute when I needed to worry about being pushed back slightly was very nice. With that in mind, I made a quick detour to the ruins for the very large Ember. Naturally, a quick detour in this run is in no fucking way quick. I take out the visible Artorias, but I get bored very quickly, and decide to just book it and hope for the best. I am hounded the entire way, but once I'm up the stairs I'm safe, and I grab the Ember. I also make a break for the chunks, but Sephiroth decides to spear me right as the chest opens. I try to clear out the courtyard on my next try, but again, Skybox Andy strikes again. I actually just don't care that much about upgrading the composite bow. I take my ego and decide that it's better destroyed against the last 2 lords than upgrades I don't need. A plus 13 bow mixed with the Tear Stone is honestly incredible damage anyways. Okay, 2 full lord areas left. Naturally, I pick the lesser of 2 evils. I'm very grossed out at the prospect of clearing Blighttown again, but it still is more attractive than the possible softlock in the prison. I use the elevator to trigger the Tear Stone and get to work. It is dreadfully slow, but extremely satisfying. My first clear took me an hour and 15 minutes. This clear took me 23 minutes, nearly an entire hour faster. 23 minutes of R1 pressing is definitely not enjoyable, but compared to before, I will absolutely take it. Onto the ruins. The bonfire isn't safe, but I take it regardless and make my way to Ceaseless, who for some reason actually is himself. I have no idea why, considering in the Manus run he was just replaced. I take him out, but this triggers the real boss fight, the horde of Taurus demons that can aggro from all the way in the lava pit. The ruins are unfortunately easy for them to navigate, so I'd need to find a way to deal with all of them, as well as the billion Capra demons below. I'll get to those guys shortly. I experiment a bit with the cliff face, but it's too short to kill them with full damage, so I instead try to abuse their pathfinding by jumping off and force them to take the path. There are so many enemies here. The ninja ring absolutely carries me, and I make it to the fire sage with a bit of luck. Naturally, it can't be that easy. His children corner me and I no longer have the safeguard of the fog wall to stop every single Taurus and Capra following me deeper into the ruins. Now, in case you were worried this wasn't going to be difficult, don't be. The first try was a fluke. There are quite a few groups of Artorias to keep track of, and so my strategy is to slowly deal with all of them and heal up in between. This bridge is fairly good for baiting off, and I usually manage to take out 2 or 3 from the initial group. The problem is the next chunk, as there is just way too many Artorias to just sprint past. I opt for aggroing as many as I can and baiting them all the way back up to the bridge I mentioned. Along the way, 1 or 2 always fall off, and the rest die to the lava, fall off the bridge, or I just duel them when I can. I repeat this many times, as you can tell by the soul count, but eventually I make some progress. The Artorias from the other side try to rush me, but they get stuck on an invisible wall, and I can safely take them all out, before moving on happily to the centipede demon. I'm condensing that strategy quite a lot, it took an extremely long time, but regardless I can move on to Izalith. I invest an Artorias coin shortly before entering, and withdraw a solid 1.5 million souls into an offshore account. I also do it again just for the hell of it. Izalith is naturally almost cleared out, with the remaining Artorias cooking in the lava when they try to buff. The next part is a lot more annoying, however, as I immediately realise that they can climb the tree branch and follow me, and I am promptly squished. On the next go, I get them stuck at this spot here, and slowly expunge the demon population. Despite some very low brain cell gameplay, I do eventually make my way through, and take out the bed, which I already knew was just an ARTORIAS instead. One lord left to go. No more procrastinating. I head to the giant for the last time to restock and max out everything I have. I have no idea how long I'm going to be stuck in the archives, and this is my last chance to prepare. Now, before I keep going, I just wanted to preface this section a little, with the fact being that I have condensed the vast majority of the micro strategies I've had to use throughout this run. Most overly specific areas required just that level of strategy, and for this poor video's sake, I either condensed or removed altogether the sections that took too long to figure out. This area, the fucking archives, is the exception. This was by far the worst section of the run, and it deserves a little highlight reel for how stupidly meticulous it was to complete it. Now, I obviously didn't know at the time how awful it would be. I expected it, as I've mentioned many times, but I was still optimistic, because regardless, this was the final section of the run before Gwyntorius. I was almost free. The first section is the same as before, just extended, as I also need to bait the main library ARTORIAS down the elevator as well, to make it possible to run past. Eventually, emphasis on eventually, I clear out enough that it's safe to just run through, and make my way up to Seath. One more thing worth noting, there is a skip you can do on the elevator that will allow you to skip the bonfire lockout, as well as most of the archives. It's fairly easy to do, and I was aware it existed while I was playing this run. Just to emphasize, I chose this. I die extremely slowly to Seath, and immediately rush for the key. I get stun locked so bad, I can't even get the prompt off the screen. Oh boy. I open the door and am greeted with the horde of newborn ARTORIASes, and despite a few scrapes, I make it to the ladder. I'm completely safe up on the wooden boards. My plan is to bait as many as I possibly can underneath and behind me, so that I can make it to the ladder down the bottom. But half the ARTORIASes must have gotten stuck somewhere, because I only managed to bait a few. I give it a shot anyway, taking some chip damage, but all seems well so far. I get ambushed by 3 more, but with a bit of AI abuse, I can run underneath. On my first try, I managed to get to the ladder and poise my way through, grab the key and stop at the alarm. That's the easy part finished, in only 1 death. Now, despite how many ARTORIASes there were in the prison section, there was always more than enough room to skirt around them or bait out their mega jump attack, as well as that completely safe section I mentioned. Now, what do you do when there is that same amount of ARTORIASes, but you have none of that? That, dear viewers, is the million souls question for the next fucking part. The first issue is the entrance. There is 1 ARTORIAS that spawns right in front of the door, and 2 that very quickly run in. They can attack me through the door and walls. There's an invisible wall blocking me from baiting them out, and no room whatsoever to try and shoot them. The fact that the 2 ARTORIASes can enter the room means that they can also chase me from it, meaning I'd need to either dodge and outrun 3 ARTORIASes in a tiny room and hallway, or find a way to kill them. On my next try, I attempt to dodge past the first ARTORIAS and heal up before going, but that small action wasted too much time, and the other 2 were able to catch up and corner me. This means at minimum, I needed to be up that ladder without being slowed down in the slightest, because once 3 ARTORIASes are on that door, I have no chance. I make it past on the next try, and onto the next issue, this hallway. This was nothing but luck. The only way to get past is if almost every single ARTORIAS does the mega jump. I get lucky here, but naturally I wouldn't be explaining this if this was the only time I dealt with it. The staircase is free initially, and I managed to turn it, but am immediately cornered into the little box. As a bonus, this is what happens if I don't immediately move when I respawn. On my next go, I make it up the ladder perfectly, faster than I had before, and get past the first ARTORIAS, only to catch a ballistic missile with my face. This is because I was too fast. Too slow up the ladder and I'd be blocked out by all 3 ARTORIASes. Too fast and it will trigger the jump attack, which will place the other 2 ARTORIASes inside the corridor, also blocking me. To get out, I had to make it up the ladder quickly, then dodge the first ARTORIAS for a few seconds, then right as the other 2 enter the slightly wide enough hallway entrance, then run for it. I also needed to take as little damage as possible, as I'd need it for the next part. Speaking of, I make it back to the library and do my best to lure away the ARTORIASes from the stairs, so I'm not blocked in. I don't have much luck. The fact that they can enter the staircase means I needed to do perfectly to avoid being caught. After a lucky escape on the next go, I prove my own point and find that yes, I do need to get rid of them all first. My next attempt additionally proves that yes, the time I made it past on the first go was in fact a fluke. Fun fact as well, I physically cannot light the bonfire, which means that when I die, I don't get my Estus back. This means I have 0 quick healing, only my miracles, which lock me in place for 3 times as long. This puts even more pressure on dodging the entrance Artorias perfectly, as I had no safe way to get the health back. Even better is when this fucking happens on the ladder and the attempt is over at the start. On my next go through, luck seems to be on my side. I nearly get caught at the entrance, but manage to escape and heal. I make it to the stairs and every Artorias jumped off. I get body blocked in at the top, but barely manage to squeeze my way through. I book it to the ladder and finally have a bit of safety. This is the furthest I've gone. And honestly, this might be it. I heal up barely in time and sprint to the courtyard. There are a ton of enemies here, so I decide to stay up top to wait for a good opportunity to jump and make a break for the cave. But in my hubris, Artorias penetrates me from behind, and I am ravaged amidst the grass and rocks. The really cool added part of failing my best attempt at making it through is that now I have to hit the staircase lever again. Oh, sorry, did you say something about strategy? About how it should be easier now that I've painstakingly created an extremely time-dependent route? I have to say, this area gave me the most prominent "is this even worth it" feeling out of every area in the run so far. The only tools I had to work with was my healing and the ninja ring. There was absolutely no way to kill a single Artorias, as every single edge had a railing inside the library. And to top it off, if I wasn't perfectly on time, which is really hard to do, factoring in the RNG of Artorias' attacks, then the attempt was just over, with no chance whatsoever. It's worth the clout, my lizard brain hissed. So, I kept trying. I eventually get lucky and manage to hit the lever. I even managed to get to the right staircase, but I don't use it as there is no way in hell I'm getting off of it. My next go, I flawlessly dodge the entrance, but get blocked here for the first time, and am dominated by multiple Artoriases who are way too into the idea of CNC. Eventually, I managed to make it back to the lever, but completely waste it. Even if I had full health and survived the lunge, the second Artorias landed just perfectly enough to block me in. I hate this game. Case in point. This area really was the final boss of this run. It was literally all I had to deal with. Gwyn and the kiln was definitely going to be easy. All I had to do was beat this last, greatest challenge. Even when my timing was perfect, luck still had a massive factor, and unfortunately I just had to keep retrying and hope it would actually be on my side for once. I don't know how many deaths I had in this area, but I genuinely would say a third of the total deaths for the entire run were inside this library. The only good thing was that it was extremely quick to retry. Even if that meant just hitting my head against this brick wall over and over, I could at least do it super efficiently. Eventually, I finally got a bit of luck. I was able to make it to the lever, and got around the stair knights by dodging the same way as before. For the second total time, I made it to the courtyard, and this time I just sent it. I was very nearly annihilated, but I squeezed through, got a heal off, and just kept running. I dodged every single knight, and despite being chased the entire way, made it to the other side, and finally was able to put my bow to use. I spent an enormous chunk of this run firing arrows, but here it felt like a boring but well-deserved reward for making it past this gauntlet. Torius tried to put up a fight, but with one last heavy attack, I finally beat the 4 lords. I let myself get bodied by the clams, just to feel something, and headed back to Firelink. I initially decided to sword fight this Artorias, just as a farewell to how awful Firelink was this run. But my heavy attack doesn't stun him, and he pulls this shit instead of letting me kill him. I do feel that this summed up the run though. I check on Crestfallen as his dementia is really starting to settle in, and say bye to all my little buddies before heading to the kiln. I fight every Artorias I can on the way, and finally there was just Gwyn. I do try to beat him hitless, just as a point, but I lose my patience and just wail on him instead. One last heavy attack puts him down, and I leave the shrine a complete but broken undead. Holy fuck, that was so much worse. This run clocked in at only 24 minutes more than the Manus one, but that is exclusively because of the red tier stone ring quadrupling my bow damage. I think because it applies to both the arrow, the headshot multiplier, the counter multiplier, and the bow itself, it genuinely cut 10 hours off this run. If I didn't think of that, especially considering I only had access to the Dragon Slayer bow for most of the run, my god, I don't even know what the final time would have looked like. Anyways, I officially decree that this was not worth the clout, but despite that, it was still fun trying to problem solve so many weird and specific situations. In hindsight, it was at least. Thank you for watching, if you made it all the way through. I very much appreciate the support, and I am sorry it took so long for this video to exist. My upload schedule and I are not on speaking terms, unfortunately. That's all for now. I'll be back next week with the hitless version. Goodbye.